Welcome, and thank you all for registering for and attending this September Learning Views webinar sponsored by TrainingPros and Harrisburg University. My name is Justin Dedick, and I work with Harrisburg University mainly in the management of online learning technologies and institutional instructional design efforts. We hope that the attendees today will be able to walk away from this session better informed on how to navigate the minefield that is LMS or talent management technology selection processes, which can be cumbersome, and also to discuss the reality of what those systems can do. We want you to be able to leave the session with ideas and motivation to start implementing learning strategies or perhaps to pursue additional educational certifications in the learning and development field that will allow you to develop these types of solutions with your clients or your organization. So I'm going to take a moment here and talk about the partnership between TrainingPros and Harrisburg University, which is a very strong partnership. TrainingPros and Harrisburg University are partnering on the Learning Views webinar series because we want to share the latest developments that TrainingPros is observing with their clients and to demonstrate how Harrisburg University is able to provide a master's level program to professionals who want to or need to pursue an advanced degree in learning technology spaces. TrainingPros is the leading provider of contract learning and development talent in the United States. They provide organizations the talent they need to design, develop, and deliver learning solutions to their organizations when they do not have the internal capacity or expertise to do so otherwise. TrainingPros provides instructional designers, technical communicators, e-learning and m-learning developers, trainers, facilitators, and organizational development consultants. Their clients work with local relationship managers who are from the L&D industry who invest in learning and their client's business. They can also consult on the right staffing solution for projects and organization, and then provide the right talent the first time, which we know is very important. So here at Harrisburg University, we translate the latest developments in learning technologies into a master's program for professionals responsible for building skills and capabilities in corporate organizations. Harrisburg University provides students with leading-edge approaches and skills to help them apply existing and emerging learning technologies in a variety of learning environments. To learn more about the program, you can click on the link that's provided on these slides here, and I'll put my email address into the chat as well. So today, we are very pleased to have Keith Meyerson with us to talk about learning management system and talent management selection processes. Keith is in a unique situation as he has served as both the client and partner for some of the major system vendors out there. And we're very fortunate to have someone with his unique insight to present to us today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Keith Meyerson.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to listen to this. We've got a small, intimate group, so Justin will take your questions in the chat, and he'll feed them over to me, and I'll make sure that I keep my eye out for those so I can respond as we're going through. So please don't feel you need to wait to the end. Since it is a small group, I'd like to make sure we personalize this as much as possible and make sure you get the information that you need. So just a little background. I've been in the learning industry for many, many years. I actually started out as a water survival instructor in the Marines, and that's where I kind of caught the bug of learning and development. And since went on through organizations like Polo Ralph Lauren, spent almost 11 years with Tiffany and Company, and relocated to Dallas in 2009, and I ran L&D for Neiman Marcus. After that, I actually went into consulting for a little while. So I went from being a client that was selecting and using learning and talent systems to a implementation partner where I was helping other organizations not only select the right products, but develop an integrated talent management strategy so they could get the most out of their shiny new toys. So one of my last clients was United Airlines as an example. So A lot of fun, a lot of knowledge, but I know where the bodies are buried now. So I'm back on the client side working for Santander Consumer. We do automobile finance. We actually, there's an interest in our, controlling interest in our organization from Banco Santander, which is one of the largest and oldest banks in Europe. And I head up talent management here. So I'm actually walking the walk. So I leverage the technology to execute on the strategies that I have. And I wanted to take this time to kind of share some of the insight into how to even consider going about this process, which, for many people, they might do it once in their lifetime. But when you move organizations, if you do it twice, it's amazing. You're a pro. But it's a huge decision, and it involves a lot of money. So a lot of organizations, a lot of people try to take it on themselves without really thinking through all of the critical components that will make this successful or not. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, just to make sure you guys are focused or know where to focus on the right things to make your, not just the selection, the correct selection, but how do you implement it and how is it going to be sustainable? What are the things to think about? So today we're going to talk about, what is the right technology and how do you think about aligning what the business outcomes are with the technology rather than just focusing on features or processes. And then at the end, I want to make sure that I really focus on how to create a fit gap analysis, because while these systems are highly configurable, they're now primarily SaaS. They're not installed, so they're really not customizable. So you have a lot of flexibility, but not 100% flexibility. So really understanding what are you willing to do with the system versus where are you going to dig your heels in and force your processes. That will allow you to understand a fit gap and what the technology can do versus what perhaps you may have to do from a workaround standpoint. So the first question, I'm going to ask the group. We got a small group of people, but how many, just by show of hands, how many on here are actually actively looking for a learning system, whether it's a new system that you're buying for the first time, or are you looking to replace a system that you currently have? You guys, up to the top, there's a raised hand button. I don't know if you all can see that next to the microphone. If you just click that, let me know if you are. Just raise your hand if you're looking for one right now. Okay. All right. So the first question I usually ask people is, do you even really need a learning management system? And I ask this because what's happened in the industry is there's been cannibalization, as I refer to it. So what's happened since 2009, 2010 is a lot of the vendors have acquired the skills of a full talent management platform. So prior to that, you had standalone learning management systems. So Learn.com was a phenomenal platform, but it was purchased by Taleo, which was then purchased by Oracle. Plateau was another great standalone learning management system, which was purchased by SuccessFactors, that's owned by SAP, and reconfigured for the web. So the industry's changed, the market's changed, and I used to say, unless you're in a highly regulated, controlled industry, a learning management system, it really only gives you the ability to measure cheeks in the seats, right? It doesn't allow you to show the impact on development plans or performance gaps or succession readiness. So when people tell me they're really looking for just an LMS, I really like to challenge that to say, how are you going to report and show the benefit and the value? If your idea of showing value of a learning system is how many hours of training you've done or how many test scores you've gotten over 80%, I would say that's probably not aligned with what your CFO, CHRO, or CEO thinks is important to drive the business forward. So again, I really, if you're looking for a learning system, you may want to consider expanding this. And when I came down to Meyerson in Dallas, they initially wanted me to help with an implementation of a learning management system. And I put a business case together and actually got approval for a full-blown talent management system. So learning, performance, succession, and social applications. So there's a broader way to look at this engagement. And one of the things that I show to support this, and I really need to put this on the slide because this is an adaptation of Berson's graphic. But what I wanted to highlight here is really the talent management framework, and the red part at the bottom, the foundational learning aspect, again, is what? A third, less than a third, maybe 20% of the overall talent management activities. So once again, if you're looking at learning only, you may be missing the picture. And if we want to show the connection of the data between learning's impact on performance, or I need to do workforce analytics to say, who's interested in this role? Are they relocatable? Do they have high performance ratings? Are they top box succession? Have they gone through leadership development? Are they in this comp range? We're now talking elements of a talent management structure that these vendors support versus having to go to multiple systems for multiple data points. And we're at a place now here with my talent system where I call it the CarMax buying guide, where basically I can set up a search to say, pull data from all these different aspects. So pull data from ATS, tell me if someone's relocatable. Tell me about their education experience. Do they have a bachelor's degree in this? Are they interested in relo? From performance, do they have high expectation or meets or exceeds expectation? From succession, are they top box? From learning, have they gone through my leadership development program? So what normally would have been 4 or 5 different systems, I now have access to pretty much in one click in one system. So really, again, think about what's the story you're telling, what's the value you're showing to your organization. Think about these systems. So prior to 2009, 2010, all of the systems that you see here were pretty much standalone. And the thought process has been, for many people, well, we need best in class. So they look at best in class, siloed, disconnected systems, which could be great from a feature functionality standpoint. But again, from an integrated perspective, it doesn't give you the flexibility and tell the story that you may want to tell. So again, are we doing succession planning because we know our baby boomers are retiring? How do I pull information to help leaders make educated ratings? I'd want to know, do people have learning agility? Are they taking classes? Do they have high performance ratings? Does that show me aspiration and engagement? Are they collaborating with their peers through the social network? So again, all of this information is now tied in through one interface and one system. Now, this is kind of where we get to the dark side, and me, I feel like the Wizard of Oz, where we're peering behind the curtain. A lot of these companies, a lot of the vendors have acquired the skills. So again, I mentioned Oracle, which is an HRIS, purchased Taleo, which was an ATS, which purchased Learn.com, which is an LMS. So organizations move to a full talent management suite. And the reason I have the line separating the separate modules from the HRIS is the way the systems were acquired and built, they were built to basically bolt onto the HRIS system. So the HRIS system is the gas that feeds the engine of the rest of the components. So all of these systems connect to SAP. They all connect to Oracle. They all connect to PeopleSoft, Workday, whatever. So, SAP and Oracle will try to strong arm existing clients to say, well, you're already on our HRIS. It just makes sense to turn on these other modules. The problem with that is the other modules aren't completely integrated. Now, they finally got to a point where there's one user interface. So for the user, it may look the same, but there's subtle variations in the functionality and from an admin and reporting standpoint that Oracle and SAP SuccessFactors, as 2 great examples, behind the scenes, they're basically held together with spit and baling wire, to be quite honest. They are not connected, and they will not give you the user experience, the admin experience, or the reporting that you need. And I'll talk about each of the systems, the major systems, as we go through this. So this is kind of the evolution. Full disclosure, this was a Cornerstone presentation, so obviously they're going to make themselves look good, but really Cornerstone is built on a Cornerstone platform. They did not acquire other companies. And they used to market themselves as the only organic talent management platform. And my challenge to that is, yes, it was developed by one code base, but probably with 30 different developers in 7 different countries who never talked to one another. So depending on where you are in the system, the look and feel may be different. It might be save and continue, or save and submit, or save and exit, which could be on the left side, on the right side. Minor aesthetic variations that they're now working on to have a more updated user experience. But the value for me is it truly is a connected system. So if I'm building a group of learners to send curriculum to, I could use those same data attributes of that group anywhere in the system. So I can navigate through learning, performance, succession, through ATS, through comp, using that same group. When I get to success factors, as an example, you can't do that. They call their groups audiences, and if I build an audience in learning, I can't use that same audience in other areas of the system. I have to rebuild it again, which shouldn't have to happen. And then again, from a reporting standpoint, you're not using one code base, so the data might be a little more difficult to get to. If you have a data warehouse, that might not be an issue for you. But just when these vendors go and try to sell themselves as a holistic integrated platform, they're really not. Success Factors, as an example, they purchased Plateau, which was a phenomenal product. And up until a couple of years ago, they were continuing to market and tell prospects that, oh, yes, Plateau is our LMS. Well, legally, that was accurate. Technically, that was inaccurate. When they purchased Plateau, it was an installed product. When they had to port it to the cloud, you can't just magically load it. So they had to recode it for their system. When they did that, it was no longer Plateau. It no longer had the same functionality. It lost a lot of the certification flexibility. But they still own the rights to the name. So they were still telling people it was Plateau. Oracle's another example that they just shelved Learn.com for their own in-house iLearn product, which was really a shame because Learn.com was one of the best LMSs I ever used. So really kind of peeking under the hood and understanding, okay, great, you've acquired all these capabilities, but are they integrated? Can they be leveraged throughout the system? I mean, even Workday now is trying to position themselves in the talent space. They don't have learning. Well, they're big brouhaha about them telling everyone they're building a learning management system. Well, they're about to launch their first release, and it doesn't include 2 components. One is it doesn't deploy e-learning, and the second is it doesn't track classroom training. I don't know about you, but that's kind of the definition of what an LMS needs to be. So, Workday doesn't have the completely integrated suite that they're purporting to have. Just things to be aware of. Skillsoft is now SumTotal. I just added that in. I've met with them recently. They've done a lot of work on their product. Skillsoft, mainly because they've acquired everyone in the space, and it was just a bunch of different things mashed together. Bad UI experience and bad content, but they are refreshing all of their content. Significant investment there, so I'm looking forward to those changes. All right, so some of the secrets, right? So here's the thing. I already mentioned Workday's LMS. It's not an LMS. They have a social philosophy. Now, I'm a huge proponent of social learning. I think putting the power in the hands of the people that are closest to the problems will give us the right solutions. Performance support is great, and I think social's awesome. But for anyone that has to deploy compliance training or supervisory training or things that are regulatory, this isn't going to provide the foundational things that people need. I'm on Workday as an HRIS system. When I got here, we were using Workday for performance. We had moved elements out of our other platform. I'm now putting everything back in my talent management system. I think there needs to be strict controls and governance and separation between an HRIS and your talent management system, because quite honestly, I shouldn't have access to core HRIS. I should not be able to see executive compensation, as an example. So, currently when my CHRO says, I need you to go update the CEO's goals, my response is, I can't. They're in Workday, and I don't want to go near that. And that's not the right answer, right? So the right answer for the business is, the HRIS data that we need to drive talent should be pushed to the talent system. At least that's my philosophy. Talked a little bit about success factors. They've actually took me to lunch to ask me to stop talking about them at some point. That was a couple of years ago, because whenever they went head to head with competitors in the Dallas area, they lost. When I was either on a selection engagement as a consultant before I came here, or as a reference for some of their competitors. I'm not a fan of success factors. There's no love lost there. I think they had a really great performance product. I think it just doesn't work from a talent management perspective. Oracle is not going to get anyone where they need to go from a talent management perspective. They have to integrate each module separately. It's still not a fully integrated product. The last time I saw their demo, they had to actually demo some of it on PowerPoint, which should make any clients run screaming from the demo. And then again, I mentioned Cornerstone. Organically grown platform, yes. They are in the process of refreshing their platform, updating that. There's a lot of flexibility there. Best part of it for me is that it is the attributes run through the entire system, except really for ATS to the rest of the system. You have to buy their onboarding module. So if I ask applicant questions and I want to populate that into the user profile, onboarding is kind of the bridge that brings that all in. And those are really the big things to know about the major players. So how do you go about and select? Well, the first thing, again, kind of go through the initial intro that I had about really making the determination. Is it really just an LMS, or should you think more broadly? It's been a function of what's happened in the industry is the tails wag the dog. So the software vendors have broken down the silos between the various functions, but a lot of HR departments haven't. So you still have this thick line between recruiting and the talent guys, or OD is separate from the training function, or the comp people will never talk to the performance people. I was in an engagement for a national retailer who was looking to purchase a talent system, and at the kickoff meeting, people from HR in these various departments were meeting each other for the very first time, and it was extremely telling. So really understanding, how do we all work and play well in the sandbox to deliver on a better employee experience, and solving business problems is what we're all trying to do. How do we do that in a holistic way? Is it really through an LMS, or is it perhaps through a talent management system? What you're going to find is every vendor is going to tell you theirs is the best, without a doubt. I've seen training programs that vendors have on their competitors that, one of them was framed as a boxing match and how to beat the competitor in a fight for the client. It's brutal out there. So they all drink the Kool-Aid. They will all tell you theirs the best. The key really is understanding, and people ask me all the time, Keith, what's the best LMS? What's the best talent management system? And I give them the ubiquitous consultant's answer, which is it depends. But the answer is that's true. If your driving factor is you have a very complex curricular requirements that requires nested learning objects within learning objects, sum total might be the way to go if you're only looking at that and that's your driving factor. If you're looking more for holistic talent management, you're going to err on the side of a Cornerstone. If you're an SAP shop that relies on supply chain and SAP financials, you might want to go with SuccessFactors, even though it has weak integration with learning. So again, it really depends upon your specific business case and needs. And really understanding that, articulating that to yourself and to the business is very important. A lot of them are going to, they're cost effective. You're already an Oracle shop, go with Oracle. You're already an SAP shop, go with SuccessFactors. I have a very good friend of mine who's he's a CLO for a mortgage company, engaged my previous organization for selection. We made recommendations, and based on the fact that they were an SAP shop, they decided not to go with our recommendations. They went with SAP. 6 months later, failed implementation. They couldn't get the reporting out. They had to go back through the process all over again. They ended up wasting six figures, but implementing what we had initially suggested to begin with. So really understand that low upfront cost doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get what you want to get. Ours works better with your systems. Again, that really speaks to the primary vendors. Cornerstone will say, hey, we've got this pre-templated integration with Workday. What they won't say is, but you need to hire a Workday consultant to make the mapping work. So again, really, not just what does your system do, but how does your system do it. Really should be your overriding theme when you're talking about anything with the vendors. Reporting is amazing. Native reporting in Cornerstone is very robust. Native reporting in some of the other systems is more challenging because the systems are disconnected. But again, if you have a data warehouse and you're throwing all the data into that, you can manipulate it any way you want. Again, do you have the resources and the internal energy to devote headcount to doing that or not? It really depends upon the size of your organization and where you are. If you're looking for just canned reporting, then understanding how the vendors can report on this is extremely important, especially from a talent management perspective when you're going to include, show me the learning impact on performance scores for this level of management that has gone through our leadership development program. Well, if you're only able to report on learning attributes from a group and succession attributes or from a different group, it's going to be difficult to tie those two together natively in most of these systems, except, again, the Cornerstone that has it completely integrated. You already own our system, just buy our LMS. Again, I've seen very competitive pricing because they'll just give you modules for free just to keep your business so they don't lose your business. If IT or purchasing or procurement is driving your decisions, you're going to run into issues if you're the learning and development person that actually has to manage this and execute on your strategy. So be very careful when IT and purchasing are involved because they're obviously going to focus primarily on the cost, which is important. But again, what's the time, the effort, the output, the impact that you're going to be able to make? You have to be able to tell that whole story. You can run any training or access any file anywhere. Okay, these are SaaS systems. That is technically true. You can go through either a native app that can be downloaded or through a browser and just enter the URL. It's SaaS. If you know your credentials, you can log in at home. You can log in on your iPad. The truth of the matter is, for the promise of mobile learning that's been touted over the past 5-6 years, very few people are using it effectively. A lot of people are trying to use it, but you really need to give some thought. Do you want people taking an hour e-learning course on a mobile phone? My answer would be no. However, United Airlines, they've got pilots and flight crew that are taking certification training in the ready room 5 minutes before they get on the plane. And if they don't certify, they're not getting on that plane. The door locks, they can't get in. So mobile is very applicable to the airline industry. So understanding, just because it's a shiny new toy and it can do mobile, does that really align with your strategy? Is that really a selling factor? Is that really important? Saba, as an example, redesigned their entire platform with a mobile-first thought process. So everything they do is mobile ready. That's awesome for organizations that are focused just on that. Vendors will always throw out your competitors to say, your competitors on our system, you should be on our system too, because you want to keep up with the Joneses, or I don't know what the thought process is really. I have a lot of experience in high-end retail, so Cornerstone will leverage me a lot to talk about how I used Cornerstone at Neiman Marcus as an example. So it's relative, right? So there's some unique differences in every industry. Retail, it's very challenging to get training to people on the sales floor that are fully commissioned, and anytime they take training, it's taking money out of their pocket. So, how does a learning management system or a talent management system support that? It's not necessarily in the features and functionality, but it's in the strategy on how you leverage the system. Okay. Most organizations, when they get into the selection, we've identified 5 vendors that we're going to invite, and they all typically send out either an RFI or an RFP. request for information or request for proposal. This is absolutely a big waste of time for you and the vendors. And here's why. They all lie. And here's an example. I did a selection project. We were called in, and it was after they had already started. Procurement was running this. It was for a national chain. They handed me the RFPs. I went through all of them. I just went to one question that I knew everyone was going to lie on and handed them back to the chief procurement officer and said, every vendor lied. He says, how do you know that? I said, well, because you have a question here. This is probably 3-4 years ago, but the question was, does your system support use of Internet Explorer 6? And everyone said yes. And I knew everyone lied because Microsoft doesn't support IE6. I know the vendor doesn't support IE6. IE6 is a dead browser. It's unsupportable. You can pay a lot of money on the side to do some custom things, but a lot of organizations customize the integrations with their browsers. So when the vendors came in and we said, and we had the conversation in front of the team, why did you lie? And every one of them said, because if I said no, we wouldn't be having this conversation where now I can explain why. And that's the absolute truth. They will answer the spirit of the question or the letter of the question, depending upon if it falls in their favor or not. So they always want the chance to say yes, but, or yes, and. They typically won't say no because they realize that does not get them a seat at the table. A lot of people do these dog and pony shows where, you know what, we just want to get a familiarity with the system, so we're just going to have them do just an overview so we can understand what it is. Worst mistake, because what they do is they highlight their strengths. They do not showcase their weaknesses, and they try to focus you on the shiny new toy. Oh, you never considered social collaboration in communities as a strategy, but here's how this could be the best thing that you've ever done. Here's how simple it is. And da, da, da. Well, if it was never part of your strategy, why all of a sudden is it important to you because you just happen to see it in a demo? You have to be very purposeful when you're looking at these systems to make sure they support your end game. Not, oh, we didn't know we could use this shiny new toy. Now, there's always those things that you're going to say, you know what, that really is clever. We never considered that, and here's how we can bake it into our overall strategy. But that's a different conversation. You don't want to be. It's the same premise, and I'm talking, my car analogy example because that's the field I'm in now. Never buy a car the first time you walk into the dealership because the sales guy's job is to make you fall in love with the features and functionality. His job isn't to discuss pricing. That's why they always go back and get their quote unquote manager. Salespeople aren't allowed to talk about pricing, right? They want you to fall in love with the car. That's what the salespeople do in the demos. So what I've always suggested is business case. Go back to the very beginning. Why are you purchasing the system? What do you need to accomplish? What are you trying to solve for? And then what you want to do is craft a use case that you're going to provide every one of the vendors. And you're going to want them to show you from 4 perspectives. Show me from the admin perspective. How do you create this? So if it's, we need you to develop this curriculum that recurs every other year and is only assigned to women over 40 in California that are supervisors. So how are you creating those groups or those audiences? How are you assembling the learning objects? How are you deploying the training? So the admin perspective. Manager perspective. What are the approvals? How are they notified? Can they access it on an app simply, or do they have to go through a login? Do you have SSO or not? How is that going to impact the experience? Third perspective is the user. What does the user see? What does the user have to do? Fourth perspective is reporting. They may all do exactly what you need it to do, but the question is how? How do they do it? And here's one example that I use. So I worked with an organization that during the sales process had asked, can your system deliver performance reviews to different people? Well, yes, that's why we have an online system. Okay, but our process is it goes to the user to do a self-review, the manager to do their portion. It then gets routed to an HR business partner to make sure no one wrote anything that would violate a law in it, and then back to the manager for delivery. Can your system do that? Absolutely. They go to implementation and they can't do it. They can't do it because the HRIS system did not know who the individual's HR business partner was, because it was a retail establishment and there's a map on an EVP of stores wall that says, oh, we have 4 HR business partners. This one has the Northeast, this one has the Southeast, this one has the left, this one has the bottom. But it wasn't in the system. Well, if your HRIS doesn't tell your learning or talent system what it needs to know, your learning or talent system isn't going to do anything. So again, don't just tell me as a vendor that you can do something. Tell me, what do you need to make this happen? How do I need to have my data formatted to make this happen? And then you, from a buying perspective, can understand, well, you know what, maybe that's a phase 2 approach, because we don't have that in our HRIS system. We need custom fields, or we need a new HRIS system, or we need to reorganize our data. So things to consider when that. So again, the use case from these 4 views, including the reporting side, because from an admin perspective, does it take me 8 screens to build something or 2 screens to build something? And when you think about the workload, the formula that I've come up with is, the more work that an admin has to do, the easier it's going to be on the user and the user experience. However, I like my admin. I don't want to overwork them. So if apples to apples, I see that it's easier in one system over another system, then I'm absolutely going to take that into account. So what does success look like? What are the steps to go through? Again, use case development. Know what you want. Know what you need. What are the processes and tasks? Have them show it to you. Do the system selection, and then data validation. So again, do you have the HR business partner identified in your system, in your HRIS? If the answer is no, then your talent system won't have that data. Are you structured because you want to do reporting for a call center, but the head of the call center doesn't have everyone in the call center reporting to him, because there are administrative functions in there that report outside of the call center? So are your organizational hierarchies structured in such a way that you can report on that? So really understanding, not just is the data valid, but is it structured correctly? The third aspect is business process alignment, which we're going to get into, just understanding what you're doing versus how you do it in the system, and which comes first, the chicken or the egg, and then talking a little bit about governance and change management. So again, business process alignment is really understanding the balance between your process and your platform. Now, I would not advocate that anyone should develop their strategy based on technology, right? Strategy's been around long before the technology's been around. We need to understand, what is the vision of the organization? What are our expectations? How do we execute on that? That's our strategy. However, if you build that in a vacuum and you're purchasing a new system, or you've already invested in a system, you may find inconsistencies between how you execute that strategy and how the system will work. So the focus is, can we leverage the system that I've invested in to execute on the strategy without getting mired or bogged down into the process? So again, these systems are built on best practices and leveraging the technology, and they can't account for every unique, crazy process that every organization has. When Microsoft came out with the ribbon in 2010, I doubt there were organizations screaming and calling Bill Gates saying, we don't want the ribbon, you need to go back, or you need to configure it differently for me. It's a SaaS product, it is what it is. It's the same thing with these systems. Highly configurable, not customizable. So what you want to do is leverage the efficiencies, leverage the technology to execute on your business promise without focusing on, but this is how we've always done the process before. Well, that's how you did the process in another system, or that's how you did it manually, but with a new system, it may not work exactly the same way you're used to. So a way to really get an understanding of this, and it would be ideal if you did this during the selection process, but absolutely have to do this during implementation, is detail all your processes and outcomes. What's current versus desired. Match your requirements with the platform capability. So here's what I wanted the result to be. Can we get there? Not how do we get there, but can we get there? Your vendor or your implementation partner should be relied upon to tell you best practices. Now, I'll give you an example. I was doing a succession strategy for an auto parts manufacturer out in Michigan, and they had a very prescribed way of succession planning. And they had purchased a new system. This is part of implementation. I kept arguing with the VP, saying, "But there's a better way to do it with your new system. I don't care. This is how we do it. You need to configure the system to match our processes." So I finally said, "Fine, I'll do what you want." So I did what he wanted. I brought it in for a demo, and I was very visibly, purposefully upset with what I was demoing, to the point where he said, "You obviously don't agree with what you're showing me." And I said, "Yeah, I think this is a complete misuse of your system." He said, "Well, okay, what would you recommend?" And then I went into what I had already built in his system for a demo purpose, was what I thought would be a better use of the system. It was more efficient. It gave him better reporting. It provided less clicks. Same results, but better process that he was not even aware of. And this comes to a great point, which is, what are your expectations of your vendor or your partner? Are they there to say, do you want this turned on or do you want it turned off? Now, my expectation of an implementation consultant, and this is important when you're going through your due diligence, is how well do they know learning or talent? Because if they only know the system, they're just going to say, do you want this turned on or you want this turned off? And you're going to say, well, I don't know. What are the downstream implications? And they're going to say, well, I don't know your business process, so you're going to have to make that determination. Versus a facilitator that really understands the module they're implementing, whether it's learning, performance, succession, comp, whatever. Because then they can tell you, look, based on what I'm hearing from you, based on what your business results are, business outcomes need to be, here's how I would recommend leveraging this shiny new toy to get the most out of it. So while you may be going in as the learning or talent expert in your organization, they're the learning and talent expert on multiple industries, multiple platforms. They're bringing that to bear, and they're helping you make better informed decisions about how to get the most out of this investment. To me, that's a key decision point in your vendor selection. Do you use the vendor who only knows their software, or do you vet a third-party implementation consultant that knows multiple industries or focuses on your industry and has demonstrated success with the platform that you've purchased? What they would do at the end of that is produce a fit gap. So here's what we want to do. Here's currently how we do it. But listening to you, we're open to change. So give us suggestions. And based on your appetite for change or not, they might say, look, you've told us that A, B, and C have to happen. Well, A and B can happen in the system. C is an out-of-process workaround, and here's how you would do that. And then you would be able to make an informed decision during implementation of, wow, didn't realize it was going to create that much extra work. That's a manual process. That's a risk. It's a failure point. Can you tell me how we can automate that? Or, okay, we can't automate that because that's our process. At least we could build some controls or a process in so we make sure that doesn't get lost in the mix. This is an example of a real fit gap that I did for a really well-known well-profit that I can't use their name. But one of their primary considerations was they had to have geolocation searching for instructor classes, meaning the system would know where I am by my IP address and make recommendations on the 5 facilities in my immediate area that had classes that I was looking for. System doesn't do that. The system is able to do that by creating a location hierarchy based on a city or a zip code, but it didn't do it by a geolocation service. This was a deal breaker. This organization did not find this out until implementation, and they shelved the implementation. They completely, what they purchased, they just shelved and did not use it. This is a international or nonprofit organization that worked with one of the premier talent vendors in the space, and because they were not open to this workaround, they wasted millions of dollars on a product. And to this day, still haven't implemented a new one because they're demanding this of every other vendor and other things that are just unreasonable. So again, you can stand your ground and dig your feet in that this is the way we want to do it, but it's really where the buyer had control when it was an installed system that could be highly customizable. We don't have that luxury anymore. Now, the good news is highly configurable. We can make workarounds, and the bad side of the installed highly configurable process was those companies have been bought up or are going away or going to SaaS. So you're going to have to redo all your processes anyways. So keys to success, don't wait until you install to begin implementation. Understand governance, what you're trying to achieve, how you're going to communicate, involve people. HR data integration is the number one reason for success or failure. These systems are very expensive paperweights. They're really, really stupid. They only act with the HRIS information that they're fed. If you're not giving them the right information, don't expect the right output. And then content. Content's the second reason. Content is not a field of dreams. If you build it, they will not come. Having a catalog of 3,000 learning objects is a waste of time for the average learner. They need learning that is targeted to them based on their interest or their stated interest or their role or their stated career path or their identified performance gap. Again, talking about more than learning and looking at how do we integrate this into other aspects of talent. So really, how do we aggregate content and present it in a consumable fashion so when I log in, the system knows who I am, it knows what my interests are, and it presents content that's tailored to that. Or, having peer ratings is another example. So what are my peers taking? Almost at Amazon, people that purchase this have also purchased that, or people who looked at this have recommended that. We can do that now within learning and talent systems. So again, directed learning is really pushed out versus selected, which is what I pull. So understanding the balance of what are you mandating people take versus how do you address engagement concerns and giving people what they want. How do we truly address individualized development? So the way I do it here is an example. We have competency models. We have job profiles. So people can go and look and say, oh, here's a job opening. Let me look at it. Oh, that sounds interesting. Here are the skills that are required. Let me take a skill assessment. Now I take a skill assessment and my gaps from that performance aspect are mapped to the content in the learning platform. So guess what gets spit out to me? A truly individualized development plan based on my specific gaps because we've mapped content to the actual competency models. We've married learning with performance. So it's a very strong way to get tailored user information to them. Social aspect, performance support, peer influenced. It can be validated through moderation. If you ask the question, how do I delete or censor peer content or social content? My response would be, then you should not be looking at a social module. I had a conversation with a CEO once that said, how do I control the conversation? And my response was, how do you do that now? And she just looked at me and said, yeah, you're right. But at least this way, I would know what they were talking about, and I would have an opportunity to address it. So now you're winning. Now you understand what social is about. User-centric, right? So what do I want? How do I want it? Do I want it in classroom? Do I want it mobile? Do I want performance support? Do I want to take a 1-hour SkillSoft course that requires toothpicks and no-dos? Or do I need a 5-minute YouTube video that tells me what I need to do? Performance support is kind of that just-in-time mentality, and I have that because of my retail experience where We believe in training. We just don't believe in taking people off the floor to get training because they need to service the customer. All right, well, that puts me in a pickle. So how do I get them what they need when they need it so they can get the information to do their job and they're not wasting their time off the floor for an hour? Systems now are expected to act like the same systems we have access to at home. They should not be more difficult to navigate. I should not have to explain a UI navigation to a user. No one taught me how to use a ATM. It was engineered in a way that was user friendly. Same philosophy with these systems. How do you create the right user experience? How do you create the right UI to make the navigation simple and intuitive? The Amazon, like, again, now we can allow for peer-rated reviews. So, we know that from social surveys where people tend to rely on their peer groups for buying recommendations. It's the same thing from a learning perspective. So why not allow people to rate content? And from a learning standpoint, it just expands my quality control, because if I have 10 courses on customer service and only one of them is getting 5 stars and the rest are getting poor reviews, I can rotate my content out and spend my licensing elsewhere. So it's a great opportunity. So again, things to just consider: why do you need it? What are you trying to solve for? Who's going to support it? Who owns it? Does learning own it? Does talent own it? Does the HRS team own it? Does IT own it? Good luck if IT owns it. But understanding the rules and the regulations and the governance, how are we going to actually make this sustainable so we don't junk up the system, is really important. And then how are you justifying this, right? So at the end of the year, the end of implementation, what does success look like? How are you going to report back to whoever funded this to make sure that everyone knows, hey, this was a smart investment? Things to consider that could derail you: again, process over strategy. That can get you bogged down and get you into battles with your vendor, and you're not going to be happy if you're so focused on and entrenched on your process. Is the organization ready for change? Do you introduce, you've never done succession planning, do you introduce a succession planning system with a new philosophy and the technology at the same time? Or do you do it manual year one to get them used to, well, what does potential mean? How do we rate performance? Let's have good calibration conversations. Let's really understand the quality of this. Year two, now let's focus on the technology to leverage the efficiency. I've had to do that both ways in organizations. Some have a better appetite for change than others. Again, making sure your HRIS data is there to do what you need it to do. Understanding who owns the system, because from a configuration standpoint, I have no problem with my HRIS team setting it, standing it up. But when it comes to day-to-day assignment or administrative, I want control over that, so I'm not working on their 3-week turnaround time frame and things of that nature. Governance is important. A lot of organizations set up governance structures and charters. It's a really great way to keep the system from getting dunked up. If you're in a complex environment, you have multiple business units, invariably you might end up with one business head saying, I want to change the colors, I want to change the logo, I want this process to do this versus that. Having a way to get that through governance, so you're taking the totality of the enterprise system into context versus doing these one-offs for everyone. These systems are you can configure an instance down to the individual level. If you have 14,000 employees, that's not manageable, of managing 14,000 different configurations. Have these aggregated and consistent as much as possible. But if you're in very different lines of business, they may have to be different instances that reflect the different nuances of those businesses. So I am right on time. I was kind of talking fast. I'm watching chat at the same time. Didn't see any questions come up during chat, but I'm happy to take questions now. Here's my information. That's my work email. My personal email is just my full name at Gmail, so keithmeyerson@gmail.com, my LinkedIn profile. I'm happy to connect. I'm happy to give additional information. I'm happy to go through use cases with you as you're talking to vendors and giving you kind of any insight I can. I'm all up for helping my colleagues. So anything that you want to know, please feel free to connect with me offline, and I'm more than happy to respond. I see someone's typing, so I'm just going to kind of pause here just to see if a question comes up. Okay. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, the recording is going to be available. I'm sure Justin will probably mention that as we exit this and tell you where to find it. But again, I'm more than happy to help offline. And I can actually go through. That's okay, Catherine. Thank you. I talked through the whole selection process. I can talk to you about, what happens during implementation. I'm more than happy to talk about how I've leveraged the different modules in the companies that I've been a part of and what we're doing. I've talked a little bit about that here, but if anybody wants to go into detail, I'm more than happy to do that. Otherwise, I want to make sure I'm respectful of everyone's time. I know we're coming up at the end, so if there are any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Justin to close this. Thank you guys very much for sitting through this. I really appreciate your attendance, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. That was really good, and I know I picked up a lot of good, useful information out of it. Um, so I'm going to go through a few slides here at the end. I do thank you, and if you don't mind sticking around for just a moment, let's see what the heck's going on here. This will just be 1 second. Just recap, just about who we are and who TrainingPros is. Thanks to TrainingPros. Definitely get in touch with TrainingPros if you need any talent at all. And we really value the partnership with TrainingPros here at Harrisburg University. Feel free, you can reach out to me. I'll leave my email in the chat here for you if you have any interest or know anybody that has any interest in our Learning Technologies Master of Science program. There's my email address. And other than that, I'm going to switch over to a feedback slide. Just let us know how your experience with the webinar today. We're always trying, continuous improvement. That's what we're all about. So please give us the feedback. Thank you for joining, and we will see you at the next Learning Views webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.